the invitation. It was a cool autumn evening, and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air as Emily stared at the letter in her hands. She had been sitting on the couch for what felt like hours, barely moving, her eyes glued to the paper. Her fingers trembled as she held the envelope that had arrived just that morning. The elegant handwriting on the front read, "To Emily and James from your daughter, Claire." There was a sense of dread building in her chest as she opened it slowly. She had always dreamed of this moment, the day when their daughter would send them an invitation to her wedding. But instead of the joyous words she had imagined, the paper inside told a different story. It was cold. It was final. "Dear Mom and Dad, I regret to inform you that you are not invited to my wedding. I've made this decision after a lot of thought, and I believe it's for the best. Please respect my wishes. Love, Claire." Emily's heart dropped to her stomach, and her eyes filled with tears. She felt a sharp pang in her chest. The kind of pain that only comes when someone you love deeply pulls away from you without explanation. But why? Why would Claire, their only daughter, do this? The question swirled in her mind like a storm she couldn't outrun. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below with the time and location. And make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next part of this chilling story. Trust me, things are about to get even more intense. Now let's continue the story. Emily didn't know what to do with the letter. She stared at it for what felt like forever, her mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. Her husband, James, was in the kitchen, but Emily couldn't bring herself to talk about it, not yet. She needed time to process. But as the night went on, she couldn't stop thinking about the letter. Something felt off. Claire had always been so close to them, sure. They'd had their disagreements over the years, but no family is perfect. Still, this felt like something more. She picked up the phone, dialing Claire's number. The phone rang 3 times before it went to voicemail. She tried again and again, but each time, it was the same cold message. "The person you're calling is unavailable." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she felt a sharp, bitter taste in her mouth. She looked at the letter again, hoping she had missed something, but no, it was clear. Claire had made her decision. James walked into the room, his face creased with concern. What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." I don't understand," Emily said, her voice shaking. "She's not inviting us, Claire's not inviting us to her wedding." James stared at the letter in her hands, his face pale. "What does that mean? How could she?" Emily shook her head, unable to find the words to explain. She was too overwhelmed with grief, with confusion, to form a coherent thought. How had they gotten here? Was it something they had done? Or something they hadn't done? The silence between them grew heavy. Finally, James spoke, his voice low and serious. "I think we need to find out the truth. We can't just sit here, wondering why." Emily nodded, though she had no idea where to begin. Something wasn't right, and she could feel it in her bones. Claire wasn't the type of person to just cut ties without a reason, but what was the reason? And just as Emily thought she might be able to breathe again, she noticed something in the corner of the letter she hadn't seen before. At the bottom, in small, barely legible writing, was one final sentence: "If you want to understand, you'll need to come to the wedding. But you won't be invited." A chill ran down her spine. What did that even mean? Why would Claire write something like that? Emily felt the hairs on her neck stand up. This wasn't just a simple snub. This felt like something deeper, something darker. Emily and James exchanged a glance, both knowing that their lives were about to change forever. Whatever Claire was hiding, they had to uncover it no matter the cost. Stay tuned for the next part of this gripping story, where the mystery deepens and secrets begin to unravel. The days after receiving the letter felt like a blur. Emily tried to keep herself busy, pretending to go about her normal routine. But every moment felt heavy with the unanswered questions. And no matter how much she wanted to push it out of her mind, her thoughts always returned to Claire. James, too, seemed distant, consumed by his own worries. It was as if both of them were walking through a fog, unable to see the path ahead clearly. One morning, Emily found herself standing in the kitchen, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee. The morning sunlight poured through the window, but it did little to chase away the dread that had settled in her heart. She glanced at her phone again, nothing from Claire. No texts, no missed calls, just silence. She opened the letter once more. If you want to understand, you'll need to come to the wedding. But you won't be invited. The words were etched into her brain now, repeating over and over in her head. What did Claire mean by that? Was there something sinister going on, or was this some sort of twisted test? That's when it happened. The phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something told her it might be important. She picked it up quickly. Hello, is this Emily? A voice on the other end was calm but strained. Yes, who is this? Her pulse quickened. The voice sighed. My name is Sarah. I'm a friend of Claire's. You probably don't remember me, but we went to college together. Sarah, Emily felt a knot twist in her stomach. What's going on? Where's Claire? Why isn't she? I can't say too much right now, Sarah interrupted, her tone tight, almost anxious. But if you're serious about understanding why she cut you out, you need to be at the wedding. It's not what you think. The line went silent for a moment, as if Sarah was considering whether or not to continue. Wait, what do you mean? Why wouldn't she just tell us herself? Emily's voice was shaking now. What's happening at this wedding? I can't say, Sarah repeated. But you'll find out when you get there. Just be careful. Things are not as they seem. Before Emily could respond, Sarah hung up. The phone went dead in her hand. The room felt too small. Emily's heart was racing. Who was this Sarah person, and what was she talking about? Why couldn't Claire just tell them what was going on? And what did she mean by it's not what you think? Emily felt a surge of frustration and confusion. She wanted answers, not more mystery, and yet, deep down, she knew that whatever this was, it couldn't be ignored. She rushed to find James, who had just come out of the bedroom, his eyes already tired from the sleepless nights. Emily told him everything. The call, the warning, the cryptic message about the wedding. James, though as lost as she was the first to speak with some resolve. We're going to the wedding, but what if it's dangerous? What if this is all a trap? Emily protested, her voice tinged with fear. We won't know unless we go, James said, his expression determined. If Claire's involved in something, we need to be there. We owe it to her. Emily looked at her husband, torn, but deep down, she felt the same pull, the same unsettling urgency. They couldn't sit idly by, not when their daughter's life was at stake. And so, they made a decision. They would find the wedding, whether they were invited or not. But they knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary ceremony. Something dark was lurking beneath the surface, and they were about to step right into it. As the days passed, they prepared. Emily found herself packing a bag, the weight of what they were about to do sinking in with every item she added. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but deep down, she knew they were walking into something that would change everything. Claire had pushed them away for a reason, and that reason was something they needed to uncover no matter the cost. Before we go on, don't forget to leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe to stay updated for the next chapter. Trust me, the truth is about to unfold and you won't want to miss it. Stay tuned, because the next part will reveal shocking twists and answers that might leave you breathless. The hidden path morning of the wedding arrived with an oppressive sense of anticipation. Emily stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her coat, trying to calm her shaking hands. Her reflection looked back at her, pale and uncertain. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure what to expect. Every step she took toward this wedding felt like it was pulling her deeper into a mystery, one she wasn't sure she was prepared to solve. James, equally tense, was pacing in the living room, his brows furrowed. His usual calm demeanor had given way to a nervous energy, and Emily could feel the weight of it hanging in the air. They had agreed to go, but the uncertainty was suffocating. I don't like this, James muttered, staring out the window, watching the rain fall in sheets. There's something off about all of this. I've never felt this. Lost before, Emily reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. I know, but we have to go. We owe it to Claire to understand what's really going on. And we need to make sure she's safe. The words came out more as a reassurance to herself than him. But the truth was, they didn't know what they were walking into. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore, it was about the fractured bond between mother, father, and daughter. It was a last-ditch effort to heal a rift they hadn't even understood. They had no invitation, but the letter had given them a clue. The wedding wasn't in the town where Claire grew up. It was miles away, deep in the countryside, in a small, remote village that neither of them recognized. Emily had searched the address on her phone, but the location seemed almost too quiet. There were no hotels nearby, no clear paths, no helpful signs. It felt like a place that didn't want to be found. But find it they did. The drive was long, and the rain continued to fall, the road slick and treacherous. The trees around them were a blur of dark green, the landscape nearly swallowed by the heavy storm clouds above. They passed through a few sleepy towns, none of which seemed familiar. The silence in the car grew thick, broken only by the sound of tires on wet asphalt. Do you think we're going the right way? Emily asked, her voice tight with nerves. She kept glancing at the GPS, which seemed to be losing signal every few minutes. I don't know, James said, his grip tight on the steering wheel. But we don't have any other choice. We've come this far. They drove for hours, the world outside seeming to grow darker with every mile. The GPS finally showed an exit to a small road that led into the woods. The narrow path was barely wide enough for the car to pass through, and Emily couldn't help but notice how isolated everything felt. A strange sense of unease crept over her. It was as though they were leaving civilization behind, heading into a place where time stood still. Or worse, a place that was deliberately hidden from the world. As they neared the destination, the rain began to ease up, but the air grew colder, and a strange fog rolled in from the edges of the forest. Emily shivered, though she couldn't tell if it was from the chill or the feeling of being watched. The road forked in several directions, but at the end of one path, they saw the old, crumbling mansion. The structure was massive, even though it had clearly fallen into disrepair. Its walls were lined with ivy, the windows dark and lifeless. A large iron gate stood at the entrance, half open, and beyond it, the mansion loomed like something out of a forgotten dream. Is this it? Emily whispered, her throat dry. James slowed the car, but neither of them moved to get out. They simply stared at the mansion, its foreboding presence swallowing up the light around them. It looks abandoned, James murmured, his voice almost lost in the thick fog. Are we sure this is the place? Before Emily could answer, they saw something that made her heart stop. A figure, a woman in a white dress, standing in the distance, just beyond the gate. Her face was hidden by a veil, but her posture was straight, almost unnatural. She didn't move, just stood there as though waiting for them. Who is that? Emily asked. Her voice barely audible. James didn't answer. Instead, he shifted the car into park. His gaze fixed on the figure, he hesitated, then finally spoke. His words uncertain. It doesn't feel right. This place, it's like it's been frozen in time. Emily's heart pounded. The woman in the dress hadn't moved an inch. Yet there was something so chilling about her stillness that it felt like she was watching them, waiting for them to make a move. They sat there in the car for a long moment, neither of them willing to speak, but both knowing they had no choice but to go forward. Finally, James turned to her. Are you ready? Emily swallowed hard, her mouth dry. I don't know. But we need to know the truth. With a final glance at the mansion, they both got out of the car. The fog now thick enough to obscure their surroundings. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and Emily's pulse raced as they walked toward the gate. As they passed through the threshold, Emily looked at James. Do you think this is all a mistake? What if this is dangerous? I don't know, James replied, his voice tight. But we'll face it together. Whatever's happening, we'll get to the bottom of it." The woman in the dress was still there, though now she was much closer, standing just behind the gate. Her face remained hidden under the veil, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about her presence. "I think we should turn back," Emily said, a surge of panic rising in her chest. But before they could move, the woman in the veil stepped forward, her voice suddenly cutting through the air. "You've come, then," she said, her tone almost knowing's. Emily's breath hitched. "Who are you?" she asked, though her voice trembled. "Where is Claire?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached up, pulling the veil from her face. Emily gasped. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't even someone she recognized. The woman had pale, lifeless eyes that seemed to see right through them, her lips parted in a knowing smile. Her skin was ghostly white, almost translucent, and her hair hung loosely around her face, dark as night. And then she spoke again, her voice cold and distant. "Your daughter is not who you think she is." The words hit like a slap to the face. Emily's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "What's happening here?" The woman took a step back, as if she were reluctant to answer. "You'll find out soon enough," she said, her voice soft but laced with something darker. "The wedding. The truth. They all lead back to the same place." Before Emily could ask anything more, the woman turned and disappeared into the fog, leaving only the sound of her footsteps echoing in the empty space. James grabbed Emily's arm. "Let's go," he urged, his voice urgent. "This isn't safe. We need to leave now." But Emily stood frozen, staring into the mist where the woman had vanished. Something told her that leaving now would be a mistake, but she didn't know if she was ready for what lay ahead. Before we continue, I want to know where you're watching from and what time it is. Drop a comment below and make sure to like and subscribe to stay updated for the next chapter. You won't believe what happens next. The answers are coming. But will they be what they expect? Stay tuned. This mystery is far from over, and the deeper they go, the darker it gets. The ceremony, they didn't leave. James had insisted they turn round, to return to the safety of the car, to get out of this foggy, eerie place before things got even more dangerous. But Emily couldn't bring herself to go. The feeling gnawed at her, the feeling that they were on the verge of something too important to walk away from. Something that might explain why their daughter, Claire, had pushed them away and why she had written that cryptic letter. Emily turned back to the mansion, her heart thumping in her chest. The mist seemed to be thickening, rolling in from the surrounding woods, swirling around her feet like it was alive. She could barely make out the distant shape of the mansion in the fog now, but she knew they were closer. She could feel it. Every part of her screamed to go back, to run far away, but her feet moved forward. James, though visibly worried, didn't stop her. Perhaps he saw it in her eyes, the same determination. He hadn't seen his daughter in years, but he loved her, and he wanted answers just as much as she did. Without a word, he followed her as they both pushed forward, making their way through the mist toward the dark silhouette of the mansion. The gate creaked as they pushed it open, the iron hinges protesting in the silence of the afternoon. The air felt heavy with the promise of something unnatural, as if the very ground they walked on was different. Emily glanced at James, but his expression was unreadable, his eyes darting around the fog, trying to make sense of the strange surroundings. "We should have stayed in the car," James muttered under his breath, his footsteps quickening. But Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was elsewhere, focused on Claire, and whatever truth was waiting at the end of this winding, treacherous path. The mansion loomed before them, its once grand architecture now weathered and decaying. The windows were dark, their glass cracked in places, and ivy clung to the walls as though trying to reclaim the building for nature. It felt abandoned, forgotten, but Emily knew it wasn't. The woman in the veil had said, "The wedding is here," and that's where they were. The front door opened slowly as they approached, its hinges groaning as though it hadn't been used in years. The shadow of a figure stood in the doorway, watching them. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't the woman in the veil either. It was a man, tall and thin, his hair a dark mess that hung just above his shoulders. His face was pale, almost ghostly, his eyes fixed on them without blinking. There was something haunting in his gaze, something that made Emily's stomach twist in unease. "Welcome," he said, his voice smooth but unsettling. "You've finally arrived." Emily and James exchanged wary glances. Emily's voice caught in her throat as she spoke, the words barely escaping her lips. "Where is Claire?" The man stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. "Come inside. You'll see her soon." The ceremony is about to begin. There was no hesitation in his invitation. His expression remained unchanged, as if he were merely offering them a seat at a show they were meant to watch, not participate in. Despite the strange chill in the air, Emily felt an almost magnetic pull toward him, toward whatever lay beyond that door. Reluctantly, they entered, the door closing with a heavy thud behind them. The inside of the mansion was dimly lit, the air stale and thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. The walls were lined with portraits, but the faces in the paintings were twisted, distorted in ways that made it hard to look directly at them. It was as if the very people in the paintings were staring back at them, watching their every move. The man led them down a long, narrow hallway, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The only sound was the faint rustle of cloth as he moved ahead of them, guiding them deeper into the house. Emily's nerves were stretched taut. Every corner they passed seemed to bring more tension, more uncertainty. She tried to catch a glimpse of the rooms they passed, but they were too dark. They all felt empty, abandoned. Finally, they arrived at a large wooden door at the end of the hall. The man stopped, turning to face them. "Inside," he said quietly, his voice colder now. "She's waiting for you." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't understand why her body felt this way, anxiety mixed with a deep, gut-wrenching sense of dread. Claire was just behind that door. Or at least, that's what she hoped. But the closer she got, the more she wondered if it was truly her daughter waiting on the other side. James squeezed her hand, his face pale, his eyes searching for any sign of comfort. But there was none to be found. The man opened the door slowly. The dim light from within flickered like a candle struggling to stay alive. Emily stepped forward, her feet almost unwilling to move, and James followed her closely. Inside, the scene was unlike anything Emily had expected. The room was large and grand, though it looked as if it hadn't been touched in decades. The walls were lined with dark wood, and strange tapestries hung from the ceiling, their threads tangled and torn. There was a long table in the center, covered in a white cloth. Candles, tall and dripping with wax, lit the room in an eerie glow, casting long, strange shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the smell of wax and something more, something metallic, almost rotten. At the far end of the room stood a lone figure. Claire. But not the Claire Emily remembered. Her daughter was standing there, her back to them, her figure shrouded in a flowing white gown. The gown wasn't the kind of wedding dress Emily had imagined. It was too old-fashioned, almost ceremonial, with dark embroidery creeping along the edges like vines. Claire's hair was pulled back into a tight knot, her face pale and distant. But it wasn't just Claire that made Emily's heart stop. It was the way she was standing. Her posture was stiff, unnatural, as if she were under some kind of spell. There was no joy in her movements, no excitement or nervous energy. She wasn't the girl who had dreamed about her wedding day since she was a child. She was something different, something broken. "Claire," Emily called out softly, but her voice caught in her throat. The figure didn't turn around. Instead, a deep voice filled the room, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You have arrived at the right time. But the question is, are you truly ready to know the truth?" The voice sent chills down Emily's spine. It wasn't Claire's voice. It wasn't the man's voice either. It was something else. Something that came from deep within the walls of this house. James stepped forward. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice strong but shaking. "Where's our daughter? Why did she send us this letter? What is all of this?" But the voice only answered with silence. The candles flickered violently as if the very air was growing heavy with some unseen pressure. Claire turned slowly, her face finally coming into view. But what Emily saw made her breath catch in her throat. Claire's eyes, those beautiful eyes, were now black. Not just dark, but pitch black, like to bottomless voids that absorbed every bit of light around them. Her skin, once so full of life, was now pale, almost gray, like a corpse that hadn't seen the sun in years. Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Mother." "Father," she whispered, her voice hollow. "I've been waiting for you," but Emily couldn't speak. She couldn't move. All she could do was stare, frozen in place as her daughter, her beloved, bright-eyed Claire, looked at her with a coldness that made her heart shatter. Is this really you?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Claire's smile widened, but it wasn't a smile of love or warmth. It was something far darker. "No," Claire said softly, "this is not the Claire you knew. This is who I've become. The mystery is deepening, and we're just getting started. Stay tuned for more." The unraveling, the room seemed to close in on them. Emily could hardly breathe. Her daughter Claire stood before her, but she wasn't the person Emily remembered. The warm, laughing girl they had raised, the one who had danced in the living room as a child, the one who had shared secrets and dreams under the stars. This was not her. The figure before them was cold, detached. A mere shadow of the girl Emily had known. "Claire, what happened to you?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Claire tilted her head slightly as if considering her words carefully. Her smile, if it could even be called that, was the only response. It was eerie, too perfect, like a mask that couldn't hide the darkness behind her eyes. "This is who I was always meant to be," Claire said, her voice a whisper that cut through the tension in the room. It was soft, too soft, almost like she wasn't entirely there. Like she was speaking from somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the room. Emily reached out, desperate. "No, Claire. This isn't you. We're your parents. We love you. We always have. Please, talk to us. What's going on?" But Claire didn't respond immediately. Her eyes, those empty black voids, locked onto her mother's with an intensity that made Emily's stomach churn. There was something hollow in them, something that had been erased. "I'm not who you think I am," Claire said slowly, as if the words were painful to speak. "I've become something else. Something better." James stepped forward, his voice filled with a rising anger. "What the hell are you talking about? This is insane, Claire. You're our daughter. You can't just throw that away." But Claire didn't react to the anger in his voice. Instead, she raised a hand, a single gesture that was almost too graceful, too deliberate. Her fingers, long and pale, traced a line in the air. The temperature in the room dropped, and Emily's breath became visible in the chilling atmosphere. "Your daughter is no longer in control." The voice that had filled the room earlier spoke again, its tone cold and detached. "The girl you knew is gone. This is her destiny now." The words hit Emily like a physical blow, and she staggered backward, her mind spinning. She couldn't wrap her head around it. Gone? What did that mean? What had happened to Claire? Where was the girl who had laughed at family dinners? The one who had cried in her arms when her first crush had broken her heart? The girl who had begged to come home during her first semester away at college? This wasn't just a rift. This was something else. Something that went deeper than she could understand. "I know this is hard for you to accept," Claire continued, her voice as empty as her eyes. "But I'm free now. I've learned things. I've seen things. The world you live in is a cage. And Claire's lips curled upward again in that disturbing smile, "I'm beyond that." Emily felt a wave of nausea hit her. What did you do, Claire? What did you do to yourself?" "To us, nothing." Claire's voice was soft, almost sweet. "I didn't do anything. I just became." James, still standing rigid, clenched his fists. "We don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "This isn't you. You can't just walk away from your family like this. You don't have to be this. You don't have to hide in this place." Claire's smile faded, and for the first time, she seemed to falter. But only for a moment. Then the smile returned and she looked at them with an unsettling calm. I'm not hiding. I'm awakening. This is who I was meant to be all along. A part of something bigger. You wouldn't understand. You never did. But that's okay. You don't need to. There was a long pause, the only sound the soft flicker of the candles. Emily's heart ached and she could feel the tears burning in her eyes, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from her daughter. Claire, please, you have to come back. Whatever this is, it's not you. We raised you. You are our daughter, our flesh and blood. Don't do this to us. Emily's voice cracked. And for a moment, she looked lost, defeated, but Claire didn't seem to hear the desperation in her mother's words. Instead, she stepped forward slowly, deliberately, closing the distance between them. Emily could feel the coldness radiating from her. Your daughter isn't here anymore, Claire whispered. She's gone. The words were like a knife to Emily's heart. You're telling me that you're not our daughter? James asked, his voice low, almost in disbelief. No, Claire answered, her gaze never leaving Emily's. I'm much more than that. I've opened my eyes to the truth. And now, I'm free. Emily's thoughts were racing. She was losing her daughter. Losing the person she had loved more than anything in the world. The girl who had once begged to hold her hand when she was scared of the dark. The girl who had written her letters filled with love. And now this was standing before her. Claire's Emily whispered, her voice breaking. We can help you. You don't have to be this way, but Claire didn't seem to hear her. Instead, she turned, her long white gown sweeping behind her as she moved to the center of the room. She raised her arms, and as if on cue, the candles flickered violently, their flames growing higher. A low hum filled the room. It was a sound that Emily couldn't quite place, a vibration that seemed to pulse from the walls. Claire, what are you doing? Emily called out. Stop, but her daughter didn't respond. She closed her eyes, and as if she were drawing strength from something unseen, the room seemed to grow darker, colder. The candles now flickered so intensely that the shadows on the walls danced like distorted figures. Suddenly, a figure stepped into the room. It was the man from earlier, the one who had led them into the mansion. But now, he looked different. His face was more contorted, his features sharper, more unnatural. This is the beginning, he said, his voice cold and low. Your daughter is no longer part of this world. She has joined us. And you, he glanced at James and Emily. You will join us too, soon enough. Emily took a step back, a sharp breath escaping her lips. She wanted to scream, but the words caught in her throat. What do you mean, join you? What's happening here? James asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and fear. The ceremony begins now, the man said. You'll see soon enough what your daughter has become. And then you'll understand. But it's too late for you to stop it. At his words, the room seemed to shift again. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that was far and unnatural. Emily's head spun. She could feel the weight of whatever force was behind this, the weight of something far beyond her comprehension. She couldn't understand what was happening. She couldn't understand how her daughter could be so far gone, how she could be so changed. But one thing was clear now. There was no going back. Before we continue, don't forget to leave a comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is. Like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next chapter. Trust me, things are about to get much darker. The truth is unfolding, and it's more terrifying than anything they could have imagined. Stay tuned for what happens next. The wedding isn't what it seems, and neither is Claire. The final revelation, the room was now filled with a silence that was almost unbearable. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder that they had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The candles' flames flickered violently, casting long, grotesque shadows on the walls. The very air felt alive, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting for something terrible. Claire's back was still turned to them, her body eerily still, like a marionette frozen in place. Her face, pale and lifeless, was now framed by her long, flowing gown, which seemed to shimmer with an unnatural glow. There was something distinctly otherworldly about her now. She wasn't just distant, she was lost, and the realization made Emily's stomach twist painfully. The man, the one who had ushered them into the mansion, stepped forward, his cold, hollow eyes fixed on them. His presence seemed to suck the warmth from the room, and for a moment, Emily wondered if she could even take another breath. Every instinct in her screamed to run, to get out, but her feet were rooted to the floor. Fear had her in its grip, and there was nowhere to go. "You're too late," the man said, his voice soft, almost apologetic, but tinged with an eerie finality. "The ceremony has begun." Emily felt a chill spread through her body, a cold that made her bones ache. "What do you mean?" "What ceremony?" she managed to croak, the words foreign and heavy on her tongue. "The one that will transform her," he said, his eyes flickering toward Claire. "The one that will free her from her human shell and bind her to the eternal. She will ascend, and with her, everything she touches will be made pure, pure." James' voice broke, a note of disbelief threading through his words. "What do you mean, pure? She's our daughter. She's just lost, she's confused." "This isn't Claire." The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, his lips curled into a smile that was too slow, too deliberate, as if he were savoring their fear. "No, she's not your daughter anymore," he said. "And she hasn't been for a long time." Emily's breath caught in her throat. What did that mean? She turned to look at Claire, her eyes desperate, pleading, but Claire didn't move. Her eyes were still black, lifeless, hollow. "Claire, please," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "Come back to us. Please. We love you. You don't have to do this." For a moment, it seemed as though Claire might respond. There was the faintest flicker in her eyes, a spark of recognition, but then it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. Claire's lips parted and she spoke, but her voice was no longer her own. It was cold, distant, and hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far beyond her. "You never understood," Claire's voice echoed. "You never saw me, not truly. But now, I see everything. I see the truth, and I know what I am. And I know what I must do." The words seemed to hang in the air, thick with the weight of some dark revelation. Emily's mind reeled, trying to process what was happening, but it was all slipping away. This wasn't her daughter. This wasn't Claire. This isn't you," Emily choked out, her voice trembling with grief. "You're still in there, I know you are." "Please." Claire's black eyes flickered again, but there was no recognition, no warmth, no trace of the girl Emily had raised. There was only emptiness, a deep, infinite abyss that swallowed everything in its wake. "No," Claire said, shaking her head slowly. "This is who I am. I've become something greater. This is my path, and I can't turn back. I'm sorry, but I have to do this." The man beside them watched silently as Emily's world seemed to crumble around her. She reached out, a futile gesture, desperate to reach her daughter, but Claire was too far gone. "Your daughter was chosen," the man said, his voice now full of a strange reverence. "This house, this place was built for her. She was born for this moment. The truth is, she never belonged in your world. She was never meant to be human." Emily's mind swam. Born for this moment? Never human? It was as if the world she thought she knew was spinning out of control. Like the ground beneath her feet had disappeared and she was falling, helpless. The man continued, his words as chilling as the cold air that surrounded them. "Claire was always meant to be a vessel for something ancient. The ceremony has already begun. The transformation is almost complete." "Transformation?" James barked, his voice filled with disbelief and rage. "You're talking about turning our daughter into something, into this?" The man nodded solemnly. "She will become part of the eternal. A being beyond flesh, beyond time. She will no longer age, no longer feel the limitations of the human body. She will be free." "But what about us?" Emily's voice cracked. "What happens to us? If she's gone, then who are we? What are we supposed to do? Our daughter, our child, she's not here anymore. Her voice broke, unable to continue. The man's expression softened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's too late for that," he said. "There is no going back. Your daughter is beyond saving. This is the path she chose, Emily felt a surge of panic. No, we will save her. Claire, please listen to me. We will help you, but Claire didn't respond. She simply turned toward the center of the room, raising her arms as if beckoning someone. The shadows in the room seemed to thicken, swirling around her like a storm about to unleash. The man stepped back as though he was preparing for something, and Emily felt a cold hand on her shoulder. James was frozen, his face pale and stricken. Neither of them knew what to do. How could they stop this? How could they stop something so far beyond their understanding? Suddenly, a deafening silence filled the room, so thick it was suffocating. The very air seemed to crackle with energy. Emily's heart raced, her thoughts spinning. She looked at Claire, now standing tall, her arms raised to the ceiling, her eyes completely black, her entire form pulsing with an unnatural light. There was no humanity left in her. The girl they had loved, the girl they had raised, was gone. And then it happened. With a deafening roar, the house seemed to shake, the walls groaning as if they were being ripped apart from within. The shadows in the room deepened, folding in on themselves until they swallowed the room whole. The floor beneath their feet seemed to shift, and the world around them blurred into nothingness. Claire's body was glowing now, an ethereal light surrounding her, a shimmering aura that seemed to pulse with power. She was becoming something else, something more than human. Her transformation was complete. And with it, Emily and James felt a final, crushing weight descend upon them. The darkness swallowed them whole, and they were no longer in the mansion. They were somewhere else, a place that existed between time and space, a place where the rules of the world no longer applied. It was a place of nothingness. Claire was gone, and in her place was something far more terrifying. Stay tuned. The final chapter will reveal the ultimate truth, the terrifying cost of their daughter's transformation and the fate of Emily and James. The price of eternity. Everything was eerily quiet. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to make sense of the world around her. The darkness that had swallowed them whole had lifted, but the air was thick with a feeling she couldn't quite place, a strange tension that clung to the walls, the floor, the very air they breathed. They weren't in the mansion anymore. That much was clear. The house had faded, its towering walls and flickering candles replaced by a vast emptiness. A black void that stretched endlessly in all directions. The ground beneath their feet was soft, almost like sand. Yet it felt more like a surface that was alive, as if the world they stood on was breathing, shifting, moving beneath them. But what had happened to Claire? Emily's eyes flickered toward where her daughter had stood moments before, but now, there was nothing, just empty space. The aura of light that had surrounded her was gone, leaving behind only shadows that seemed to dance in the distance, moving just out of the corner of her vision. Claire, Emily whispered, her voice trembling, but the sound was swallowed by the silence. There was no answer. James stood beside her, his face ashen, his expression a mix of fear and disbelief. He reached out and grasped her arm, pulling her closer to him. "This isn't real," James muttered under his breath. "This can't be happening. It's not real, Em. It's just not." But Emily could feel the weight of the air, the oppressive stillness that seemed to press down on them. There was nothing natural about this place. And Claire was gone. She was gone. "Where are we?" Emily managed to whisper, her voice cracking as the realization of their situation sank in. "What happened to us?" James didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes scanning the darkness around them, searching for something, anything. But there was nothing, just the empty, endless expanse that seemed to stretch on forever. Then, slowly, as if drawn by some unseen force, the shadows around them began to shift. Not in a natural way, but in a way that felt wrong, as if they were alive, moving of their own accord. The air grew colder, the silence more profound, and the very fabric of the place seemed to warp and twist as if reality itself was bending. And then, out of the darkness, a figure stepped forward. It was Claire. But not the Claire they had known, the one with the soft smile, the warm embrace. The girl they had raised. No, this was something else. Something other. She was standing in front of them, but her body no longer looked human. It was almost as though she had been melded with something else, something ancient and primal. Her skin glowed faintly, but it wasn't a warm light. It was a cold, almost sickly radiance that illuminated her face in a way that made her look like a ghost, a creature from another world. Her eyes were black, completely devoid of any trace of the daughter they had loved. Instead, they were vast, empty voids like windows into an abyss that stretched on forever. Her mouth was twisted into a thin, cruel smile, and her hair, once so soft, so full of life, now hung limp and dark like tangled, dead vines. She looked at them, her gaze cold and unfeeling. "Mom, Dad," Claire's voice was the same, but it wasn't. There was no warmth in it, no trace of the girl they had raised. It was distant, hollow, as if the voice was coming from somewhere far away, a place beyond their reach. "I've transcended," she said, her voice echoing in the stillness. "I've crossed the line, and now I belong to something much older, much more powerful. Something beyond the human world. Something eternal." Emily's voice cracked and she stepped forward, trembling. "Please, come back to us. Please. We can help you. You don't have to do this." But Claire didn't move. She stood there, her form flickering in and out of focus like some ethereal wraith. Her smile twisted even further. "You don't understand, Mom," Claire said, her tone cold and almost mocking. "I never belonged to you. Not really. I was always meant for something more. This is my true self. This is who I was always meant to be. The girl you knew, she's gone. Forever." "No," Emily cried, her voice breaking as she fell to her knees. "No, Claire, please. Don't say that. We need you. You're our daughter. You belong with us." But Claire just stared at her, her eyes empty and uncaring. "No. I belong to the eternal now," Claire said, her smile growing wider, more grotesque. "I am no longer bound by time, by the limitations of the human body. I am free. I am beyond all of you." The words hit Emily like a slap to the face. She tried to move, to reach her daughter, but her legs refused to cooperate. The ground beneath her seemed to shift, pulling her down, holding her in place. James stepped forward, his voice full of defiance. "You are our daughter. You can't just throw that away. You can't," he faltered, his voice weakening. "Claire, please. Don't do this. You don't want this. You don't know what you're giving up." Claire's face twisted with disdain, her smile fading into something darker. "You think I don't know? You think I don't understand? You don't see the truth. You never did." She looked at them, her black eyes piercing through them as if she could see every weakness, every fear they held deep inside. "You're just human. You're bound by your fragile bodies and your fleeting time. You'll never understand what it means to ascend. You'll never be free." Emily's heart sank, the weight of her daughter's words crushing her. What had they done? What had happened to their girl? This wasn't just a rebellion. This wasn't a phase. This was something else. "You've given yourself over to something dark, Claire," Emily whispered, her voice desperate. "And you don't even know what it will cost you. This isn't freedom. It's a prison. You'll never be able to come back." The cold smile on Claire's face faltered for the briefest moment, a flicker of something like doubt passing through her eyes. But it was gone almost instantly, replaced by an expression of absolute certainty. "I've already paid the price," Claire said, her voice growing colder, sharper. "And I will never go back." Emily's heart shattered in that moment. She wasn't talking about a physical price. She was talking about her soul. Her daughter had lost her soul, and Emily didn't know how to save her. The figure in front of them, the girl who had once been their daughter, was now something that could never return to the world they knew, something beyond their reach. A being made of darkness, not light. But before they could speak again, the air around them shifted. The ground beneath them trembled, and a strange, otherworldly hum filled the air, vibrating through their very bones. Emily's head spun as the darkness began to pull at them, as if it were alive, hungry for their very essence. The air around them grew thicker, heavier, like the weight of the world itself was closing in. And then, suddenly, the shadows converged. Not just around Claire, but around them. The darkness was consuming the space, pulling them into its endless depths. The room, the void they stood in it, was collapsing in on itself, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "Get out!" James screamed, grabbing Emily's arm and pulling her back. But the pull of the darkness was too strong. They were being sucked into the void, their bodies dragging against the cold, unforgiving air. "Mom, Dad," Claire's voice echoed one last time, a whisper that felt like a death sentence. "This is the end of your world," and then they were gone. The shadows swallowed them whole. Stay tuned. The final chapter awaits, where the cost of the transformation is fully revealed. But is it truly the end for Emily and James? Or is there more waiting for them in the darkness? The abyss. When Emily opened her eyes, it wasn't to the warmth of the mansion, nor to the darkness of the void that had swallowed them. No, what greeted her was something far worse: a vast, endless expanse of emptiness. It was a place where time had no meaning, where space was irrelevant. It was a place that shouldn't exist. She was standing, or maybe floating, she couldn't tell. The ground beneath her feet was slick, smooth like obsidian, but with no discernible texture. Above her, there was no sky, no stars, no sun, no clouds. There was only a heavy, oppressive darkness that pressed down from every direction. It felt as though the weight of the entire universe was hanging over her, and yet she felt nothing. Her thoughts were slow, sluggish, as though the very fabric of her mind was being drained. As if the air here had the power to suck the will to live from her lungs. There was no warmth, no comfort. Only the cold, a cold so deep that it felt as if it was seeping into her very bones, erasing everything familiar. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a faint tremor running through her chest. There was no answer. "James," she shouted, panic rising in her throat. But again, the only response was silence. The void was alive with that eerie, suffocating quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence you'd expect in a peaceful place, but a silence born from something unnatural, something ancient. It felt like a waiting silence, like the calm before the storm. Or perhaps the silence after something unspeakable had already occurred. She tried to move, but her legs felt unsteady, as though they were no longer her own. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, as if the very ground itself was pulling at her, trying to drag her back down into its depths. And then she saw it, a figure standing in the distance, surrounded by an aura of shifting, black smoke. At first, it was just a shadow, barely visible against the darkness. But as Emily's eyes focused, the figure became clearer. It was Claire, or at least, it looked like Claire. But this wasn't her daughter. This was something far beyond the girl she had raised. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, its silhouette outlined by a pale, sickly light that pulsed like a dying star. Claire, or whatever she had become, stood motionless, her head tilted slightly as if studying them, watching them from a place beyond time, beyond the mortal world. "Claire," Emily whispered, stepping forward despite the heavy pull in her legs, despite the dread that gripped her heart. "Is it really you?" For a moment, the figure didn't move. And then, slowly, it raised one long, pale arm and gestured for her to come closer. The movement was fluid, to perfect, like something unnatural. Despite every instinct screaming for her to turn around, to run, Emily stepped forward. She had no choice. She had to understand what had happened to her daughter. She had to understand what this was. As she moved closer, the figure began to speak, not in words, but in a voice that echoed in her mind. A voice that filled the space around her with an unnatural resonance. "You think you can save me?" The voice was Claire's voice, but it wasn't. It was layered with something darker, something older, as though it had been twisted and corrupted by the very forces that had taken her. Emily's heart twisted with agony at the sound of it. "I never meant for this to happen, Claire," Emily whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "We can save you. We can fix this. You're still our daughter. please, please come back." The figure didn't respond right away. Instead, it stepped forward, its long, white gown flowing around it like a wisp of smoke. The closer it got, the more Emily felt a gnawing emptiness spreading through her chest. It was as if the very essence of this being was draining her soul, pulling her into the abyss along with it. "You never understood," the figure said, its voice hollow and distant. "You couldn't see what I was becoming, what I had to become. I've left everything behind. The limitations of your world, your time, your flesh. It was all just an illusion, a prison." Emily's breath caught in her throat. No, Claire, this isn't you. This isn't who you are. This isn't what you wanted." Claire, or whatever she was now, smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was cold, cruel, like a blade slicing through the fabric of everything Emily held dear. "No, Mom. This is who I was always meant to be. This is the truth." The figure's eyes flashed with an unnatural light. "I was never meant to live among you. I was always meant to join the eternal." Emily shook her head, taking a step back. "This is wrong. Claire, you don't know what you've done. You don't know what you've given up. You're not free. You've just fallen." The figure's expression flickered for a moment, and in that moment, Emily saw something faint, something fragile deep in Claire's eyes. A brief glimpse of the girl she had once known. It was there, just for a second, and then it was gone. But before Emily could take another step, the figure's cold voice filled the space again. More forceful this time. "You don't understand. You never will." And with those words, the darkness around them seemed to pulse, as if reacting to the very force of the figure's power. The air grew thicker, colder. And then, the shadows began to stretch toward them, curling like tendrils, reaching for Emily, for James, for everything. "Come," the figure commanded. "Come into the darkness, embrace it, join me." "No," Emily screamed. But the words were lost in the overwhelming pull of the void. The shadows wrapped around her, pulling her forward, dragging her toward the figure, the emptiness, the crushing cold. The darkness, they were all consuming her. Her mind began to crack, and the pull of the abyss felt like a vacuum, sucking everything away: the love she had felt, the memories of her daughter, her very sense of self. But even as the darkness closed in, even as the world seemed to unravel, Emily couldn't help but feel a sliver of hope. There was something there, a part of Claire, a part of the girl she had raised. Somewhere deep inside this monstrous transformation, perhaps, just perhaps, it wasn't too late. Before the shadows swallowed her whole, before she was completely consumed by the void, Emily made one final plea: "Claire," and then there was silence. Stay tuned. What happens when the darkness consumes all? Can there still be hope for Claire, or has she crossed the line beyond redemption? The final chapter approaches, and the truth of her fate may be more horrifying than anything they've imagined. The return to darkness. There was no light, no warmth, just an endless, suffocating void that pressed in on all sides. Emily felt as if she were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Her body was frozen in place, her limbs immobilized by the unrelenting cold. Her mind, too, felt distant and clouded, as though she were being pulled in every direction at once, caught in an inescapable spiral of confusion and fear. The last thing she remembered was her scream, her desperate cry to Claire. But now, all was silent. Silent and empty. She tried to move, tried to think, but the world around her seemed to mock her. The shadows that had enveloped her body now seemed to wrap around her very soul, tightening their grip. The fear that had surged through her before had been replaced by a strange, hollow numbness. She didn't know where she was, or if she could even remember who she was anymore. "Claire," she whispered, her voice cracking in the stillness. She could feel her own heartbeat now, thudding in her ears like a distant drum. But there was nothing else. No response. No sounds. Not even the slightest hint of life. Then, a light flickered, a faint, distant glow at the edge of her consciousness. She strained to focus on it, her heart clinging to the faintest shred of hope. Could it be? Was it Claire? But the light was too far, too out of reach. She stretched out her hand, but the shadows closed in again, faster now, like a ravenous beast. And then, as if in answer to her despair, the figure appeared once again, Claire. Or, more accurately, the thing that had once been Claire. She was standing in front of Emily, her form shimmering in the midst of the darkness, a faint, ghostly light surrounding her. But she was no longer the daughter Emily had once known. The change was complete. There was no trace of warmth, no hint of the loving girl who had once played in the yard or sat beside her mother at the dinner table. This was something else. Something dark, powerful, and incomprehensible. Claire, or whatever she was now, was no longer bound by the laws of nature. Her eyes, those black voids, seemed to drink in the surrounding darkness, swallowing it whole. Her body was too still, too perfect, as if she were more a statue than a living being. But when she spoke, it was clear that she was anything but a statue. "Mom," Claire's voice echoed in Emily's mind. It was cold, hollow, alien, but underneath the distortion, Emily could hear the faintest echo of her daughter's voice. Just the smallest trace of the girl she had raised. It was almost enough to make her believe that Claire was still somewhere deep inside this creature before her. "Claire, please," Emily gasped, the words feeling like a plea from the deepest part of her soul. She reached out, though she knew it was futile. There was no way to bridge the distance between them. But maybe, just maybe, if she could make Claire hear her, if she could make Claire remember. "Come back to us," Emily whispered desperately. "You're still my daughter. You don't have to be this. You don't have to be this thing. Please." But Claire merely stood there, silent, unblinking. The air around her shimmered, rippling like water disturbed by a heavy stone. The ground beneath Emily's feet trembled as though it, too, could sense the enormity of what was happening. For a moment, Claire's eyes flickered, just a brief moment of something unrecognizable. Some shadow of the daughter Emily had loved. But then, just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by the cold, infinite blackness that now defined her. "You don't understand," Claire said, her voice like ice scraping against steel. "I've seen the truth now. I've become something greater than this, than what you could ever be. I have left everything behind, and I will never be bound by your world again." Emily could feel her chest tighten, her breath coming in short gasps. "No," she whispered. "Please," but Claire did not respond. Instead, her form began to shift. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but then Emily saw it, a distortion in the air, a crack in the very fabric of reality. And then, from the shadows around them, other figures began to emerge. The others. Emily's heart stopped. These figures, shapeless, dark, grotesque, slowly came into focus, their forms flickering and warping like flickering flames. They were tall, impossibly tall, with eyes that gleamed like pinpricks of light in the darkness. Their faces were obscured, hidden beneath shadowy hoods or cloaks, but the aura they gave off was unmistakable, pure, ancient, malevolent power. "They are the ones who showed me," Claire's voice echoed again, but it wasn't just her voice this time. It was a chorus, a dozen voices layered over one another, all speaking as one. The ones who have been waiting for the right moment. And now that moment has come, Emily recoiled. The air was thick with their presence, and every word they spoke seemed to drain the very essence of life from the room. "These beings," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "What are they? Who are they?" Claire's eyes gleamed with that same cold, distant hunger. "They are the true Eternals, the ones who never die, the ones who see beyond time. I am becoming like them. I was always meant to be like them." "No," Emily cried out. Her voice cracked with the weight of her despair. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't lose Claire to this darkness. But there was no fighting it. No way to save her now. The air thickened, swirling around Emily, pulling at her, threatening to drag her into the depths with Claire and the other beings. She was slipping, falling deeper into the void, but she refused to let go of the one last shred of hope she clung to. If there was any part of Claire left, any trace of her daughter, that still existed in this twisted form, Emily had to reach it. "Please," Emily gasped, tears streaming down her face. "I love you. I've always loved you. Please remember me." But Claire's face remained unchanging, her expression cold and indifferent. "You never understood," Claire said again, but this time, her voice was tinged with something darker, something crueler. "Your love means nothing here. I've transcended that. I've crossed beyond it. I've seen. And now, you are nothing more than a memory to me." A distant, fading image, the words struck Emily like a blow. Her heart shattered, but she didn't give up. She couldn't. "I won't give up on you," Emily said fiercely, her voice trembling but full of determination. "No matter what you've become, you are my daughter. I will find you. I will bring you back." For a moment, there was silence. The shadows seemed to pause, as if considering her words. The eternal beings around them shifted, a quiet hum filling the air as they gathered together, their eyes glowing brighter. And then, from within the black depths of Claire's eyes, something shifted. A flicker, a spark. Something that wasn't the dark, empty abyss of the being she had become. "No," Claire's voice faltered. "No, I am not hers anymore. I am," but before she could finish, the shadows around her began to writhe. And Emily felt a crushing pressure in her chest, as though the very air was being forced out of her lungs. The figures surrounding Claire raised their arms and the world seemed to bend and twist, the darkness pulling tighter, pulling them all deeper into its heart. Claire stepped forward, her black eyes fixed on Emily one final time. For the briefest moment, Emily saw something human flicker within her daughter's gaze. And then it was gone. The shadows collapsed and Emily was thrown into the darkness once more, pulled into an endless, suffocating spiral. What happens when the last glimmer of hope is extinguished? Is it truly the end for Claire? Or is there still a chance to save her from the abyss that has claimed her? The final chapter will reveal the truth and the ultimate cost of the transformation. Stay with us as we uncover what lies beyond the darkness. The final awakening. The darkness around Emily seemed to stretch on forever, an endless, suffocating void that swallowed everything in its path. The air was thick, heavy with a cold that seemed to freeze her very soul. There was no up, no down, no sense of time or place. It was as though she were floating, drifting through the endless expanse of nothingness, lost, alone and utterly powerless. She had no idea how long she had been in this place. Days, hours, minutes? It didn't matter. Time had no meaning here. There was only the crushing silence, the kind that fills your mind and drowns out your thoughts until you are left with nothing but the weight of the void pressing against you. But then, just when it seemed like Emily might lose herself completely, she felt a shift. A sudden movement, subtle but undeniable, as if something was pulling at her from the darkness. It was faint at first, barely a whisper, but it grew louder, clearer. A voice echoing through the silence. "Mom!" Her heart skipped a beat. She gasped, her breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. Was it her? Was it Claire? "Claire," Emily whispered, her voice hoarse from the weight of the emptiness around her. Her throat ached with the need to speak, to be heard, to connect. "Claire, is that you?" The voice came again, this time stronger, more defined. "Mom, you have to listen. You have to hear me." Emily's heart hammered in her chest. She strained against the darkness, willing herself to move, to fight, to get closer to the voice. "Claire, I'm here. I'm here, please. I've been waiting for you. I've never given up on you." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The oppressive darkness pressed in around her, suffocating her once more. But then, through the suffocating stillness, a figure began to take shape in front of her. At first, it was just a silhouette, a shape, hazy and indistinct. But as Emily focused on it, the figure became clearer, more defined. And when it fully emerged from the shadows, her heart leaped in her chest. It was Claire. But not the Claire from before, not the girl she had raised, not the daughter they had known. This Claire was different. This Claire was something more, something beyond human, but at the same time, there was still a flicker of the girl Emily loved. The eyes, those deep, endless black eyes, were now softer, less empty. There was a spark of recognition in them, a spark of humanity that had been missing before. "Mom." Claire's voice was softer now, the chilling edge gone. I'm sorry." Her words seemed to tremble with the weight of something unspeakable. "I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how this all went so wrong. But I remember you now. I remember us." Emily's heart swelled with emotion. She reached out instinctively, her hands trembling as she fought against the heavy weight of the void that seemed to hold them apart. "Claire, though, my God, Claire, I knew you were still in there. I knew you hadn't gone, that you weren't lost. I never gave up on you. I never stopped loving you." Claire's figure flickered for a moment, her form wavering like a mirage, and then she was solid again. She looked down at Emily, her expression full of sorrow, regret, and something deeper, something more profound. I'm not who I was," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've become something else, something that can never return. I've seen things that you wouldn't even believe. The darkness, the power, it's in me now. I can't undo it. I can't go back." Tears streamed down Emily's face. "I don't care what you've become, Claire. You're still my daughter. You're still my child. No matter what you've seen or what you've become, I will always love you. I will always be here for you. We can find a way back together. We can find a way for you to come home." But Claire shook her head, her expression pained. "I don't know if that's possible anymore, Mom." She stepped back, her gaze falling to the dark void beneath them. "The darkness, it's so powerful. It's a part of me now. It's what I am. And I'm not sure I can fight it. I'm not sure I want to fight it." Emily's heart shattered, the weight of her daughter's words sinking in. The dark power that had consumed Claire, it wasn't something that could be easily erased. It wasn't something she could just shake off. It was a part of her now, like a cancer that had spread too far to be removed. But then, as if the very universe itself was listening, something changed. The shadows around them seemed to flicker, to writhe, as if alive. A distant, far-off hum filled the air, low and rumbling, like the sound of distant thunder. It was a hum of power, of ancient forces stirring. The void around them trembled. A crack in the darkness appeared, thin and fragile at first, but growing larger by the second. Emily's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a crack, it was a rift between worlds. And beyond that rift, she could see it, the light. A soft, warm glow, as if the sun itself was rising beyond the horizon. It was the first light she had seen in what felt like an eternity. It was the hope she had longed for, the hope she had never given up on. This is it," Claire whispered, her voice shaking. "This is the way out. But I don't know if I can go back through it. I don't know if I can leave this behind." Emily reached out, her hand trembling, her eyes full of desperation. "Claire, you have to. You have to come back to us. This isn't who you are. This power, it's not you. You're still in there. I know you are." Claire's eyes flickered again, a brief flash of recognition, of humanity. She looked at her mother one last time, her gaze filled with sorrow and love. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you." And then, with a final, lingering glance, Claire stepped toward the rift, her body dissolving into the light. The shadows around her twisted, contorted, and screamed in fury as the rift closed behind her, leaving only the faintest trace of her presence. The darkness vanished, and Emily stood there, breathing in the air of a world she thought she had lost forever. It wasn't over. It wasn't too late. But even as the light enveloped her, she knew there was still so much more to this story, so many questions that remained unanswered. What had Claire truly become? What price had she paid for her transformation? And was the battle truly over? Or was this just the beginning of something even darker? Stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching this incredible journey unfold. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to continue this journey with you. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. What are your theories on Claire's fate? What's going to happen next? Don't go anywhere, because the next part is coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.